But the thing that happened is that my student had nudged me about writing a book because I told them they can do anything. And he said,
Yes.
well, why don't you write one? And I said, well, honestly, I'm just afraid. I was honest. So I decided to write a book, and what had taken me 24 years to think about in the past, I wrote the book in 30 days.
Mm,
Largely because I was going to this event where I didn't even have a business idea. I
sure.
thought, well, if I bring a book done, at least I have something to talk about.
How are entrepreneurs like us daring bravely to build a stage, ditch the sweatpants, and step up to the mic? How do we create our own transformative events so we can get our message out into the world in a bigger way? It's not only profitable, but it's actually something we can be proud of. That's the question. And the answers are inside this podcast. My name is Sarah Pfeiffer. Welcome to Green Room Central. Today, I brought into Green Room Central Studios Azul Terronez, CEO and co-founder of Authors Who Lead. Azul is a TEDx speaker with 3.8 million views, Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestselling author, a book whisperer, and host of the Authors Who Lead podcast. His impressive list of clients include entrepreneurs, YouTubers, NFL players, board game inventors, and more. Azul, welcome to Green Room Central Studios. Say hello to Lynchpin Nation.
Oh, hello, everyone. Sarah, thank you so much. I am so glad to be here, and it's a thrill to just be able to talk to you and kind of help serve your audience.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it because, we got to hang out a few weeks ago now on your podcast because our shared virtual assistant introduced us, and that was so awesome. And I enjoyed it so much. I was looking forward to having you here on this podcast so we could spend some more time together. And I thought we'd start by having a little fun and asking you to share a story. So, a little backstory on me. About 6 years ago, I made it into my very first personal development room. And within like less than 12 months of being in that room, I had left my 16-year corporate career and started my own business. I'd sold our house that we'd been in for more than a decade and moved from the Midwest, where I'd been my whole life, to the Pacific Northwest, where we are now. We'd paid off all of the debt that we'd been under for a decade and a half. It was just such a massive shift. And because this podcast is built on the premise that being in the room is everything, I'm curious, do you have a story to share of a time where you made it into a room and it kind of had a massive impact on your life?
Yes, I do. So, like you, I was doing something else when this shift occurred. I was a
Yeah.
school teacher and a principal for many years,
Oh,
and
wow.
a professor teaching graduate students. And I knew there was something more. I just didn't know
Mm.
what. And writing a book was my first step into a new world. And being an educator, you think I'd write a book about education so I could make the next transformation to a consultant or something like this. But I wrote a book about how you don't need education to grow and change your career and love your life. I wrote a book called The Art of Apprenticeship. And the purpose of that book was because I really thought if I find somebody that is doing what I love, like
Mhm.
I perceive they're doing what I would love to do, then I could learn from them. Because I had tried
Mm.
taking courses, I tried doing it virtually, and I just couldn't make the connection that I needed. There was something I needed. So I wrote my first book, and that's a whole nother story about how that came to be. One of my students nudged me, ironically. Um, but I had signed up previously for this event
Okay.
that Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income and his friend Chris Ducker were holding in San Diego, where I was living at the time.
Okay.
And I signed up for it. It's on social media. They're like, there's 20 spots. I'm not posting anywhere else. Click here if you want to do it. I clicked and
Yep.
bought on my credit card. You know how that goes. I didn't have the money.
Yes.
No one, no one I knew spent money at like $1,200,
Right?
$1,600 on a
It's so
single day
weird.
event. They're like, are you nuts? I'm like,
Yeah.
a little bit. Even my husband said, what are you doing? I go, yeah, I'm taking a day off. I got a substitute. And then I read the details of the event, which is okay, it's hot seat style. It's a mastermind. You're going to be put in a hot seat. So why don't you send us your details about your business, your website, your funnel, your email list? And I was like, holy crap, I only know what three of these things are. And I didn't even have a business idea. I just was so excited that the person I was looking up to had an event that I signed up without really paying enough attention. I'm
Oh
kind of
my
impulsive in that way.
goodness. Okay.
But the thing that happened is that my student had nudged me about writing a book because I told them they could do anything. And he said,
Yes.
"Well, why don't you write one?" And I said, "Well, honestly, I'm just afraid." I was honest. So I decided to write a book, and what had taken me 24 years to think about in the past, I wrote the book in 30 days.
Mm,
Largely because I was going to this event where I didn't even have a business idea. I
sure.
thought, well, if I bring a book done, at least I have something to talk about. And I had this idea, so I wrote this book and I was going to show up and at least talk about it. And that
Mm,
event and that writing the book changed my life. So
mm,
I'm a big proponent of events, and why it changed is inside of the book I wrote about apprenticeship as a sort of a dying model because we don't use it.
right.
But really, you think of the blacksmith or, something like this where you have to learn by the master who's, doing the thing.
Yes.
You're observing, you're serving, you're cleaning up the scraps, you're delivering things, and maybe you get to use a piece of scrap metal at the end of a day to try something. And maybe eventually you get to try. So the idea of apprenticeship always stuck with me as a model.
Mm,
But one of the things people miss in that was that people always try to go to the top. Well, I'll just connect with a top person. And the other thing they do is they forget that this person, they're serving other people. So I thought, well, if I show up to this event and I choose to serve, then maybe this person can mentor me. I didn't know how.
yeah.
I mean, the idea that I didn't even know what kind of event it was is kind of ironic. But when I got on that stage and they gave me my 15 minutes and I told them about writing a book in 30 days and what it was
Mm,
about, these 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs who I honestly had no business being in their presence if it's a business mastermind
yeah.
were all blown away that I had written a book in 30 days.
Mm,
And that's where I got my first client. And not only that, the person I was trying to connect with, the leader, Pat Flynn, asked me to help him write his first book that became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. That's how powerful events are if you trust
wow.
them.
Wow.
So no business, no idea what I would do, walking away with not only a business, but clients on a business I didn't know would even exist before I went.
Wow. That is hugely transformational. What
Yeah.
how interesting. So you literally fell into teaching writing
Oh,
books.
absolutely. Yeah, I didn't even know it'd be a problem. I didn't know it was something to be
Mm,
solved because I wasn't thinking
mm,
like as a business. I
mhm.
was trying to find a mentor to help me figure out what could I do. I didn't know what
Yeah.
I could start. I didn't know if I wanted to do an education or not. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything. And so going to the event and showing up in a way that I was teaching was also important. And what I mean by that is it was held locally in San Diego. A lot of people were flying in though from other places, some even
Mm,
from Europe. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. People are coming all over the world to this. I was
yeah.
blown away by that for one. And then because that means they had to get a flight, a hotel, all these things. So
So
I
many
asked
things.
Pat and Chris, hey, is there like a meetup the night before, like something where people are coming to me? Because I'd love to meet them. He's like, oh no, there isn't. I was like, well, I could host one. I'll host it. I'll make sure people go. I'll find a place and I'll let people know. He's like, would you do that? I was like, of course, I'd love to do that. Like, he's like, that's great. He's like, so do you want me? What time do you want me to be there? And do you want it? Should I pay for the food? I was like, part of me just paused for a second because this was through email. And I was like, do I say what I want? Because I want to meet him. Or do I say what's right? Which is, I said, no, Pat, I don't think you should come. And I don't think you should pay. He's like, I shouldn't even come? I said, no. I said, if you come, they're going to pay attention to you. The point of this event is for them to get to know each other.
Mm,
He's like, that makes perfect sense. I go, you focus on your time with Chris. I'll take care of them, make sure they're all connected and they feel comfortable and make sure they have rides. Don't worry. He's like, great. Here's the email list. Let them know. Thank you so much. Uh, Almost more than half of the people that were signed up at the event came to the happy hour, even with a short notice. They all connect with me because I was the one communicating with them.
right.
The day I showed up, they all greeted me and talked to me. He's like, they know you better than they know me. I go, it was an amazing testimony to serving his audience. I wanted to meet him more than anything, but the idea that I put aside that to serve, that was the
Yeah.
principle of the book. And I thought, if I don't do this, this will be like a missed
Mm,
opportunity. And all those people perceived me differently because I showed up in a different way. And that event changed their life. And I think that's what made him trust me, because he didn't know
Mm.
how. I had no evidence I'd be good at this because I had never helped anyone. How would I?
Right.
It was trust. They built a certain level of trust that shifted in the perspective of everyone there. And actually, many of those people became my clients, not just him. That's what's ironic about it.
Wow. There's a few burning questions on my mind. First, I'm going to go with, because I'm so curious, what gave you, because I love events, what gave you the idea to gather them the night before, and what made you think that you were uniquely qualified to do that? I know we have this little shared thing that we were both RAs in college, and I wonder, do you, is that where it, like, you got the courage to be like, I can organize things, and that's no, that's easy for me.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that before, actually. I don't know where it came from. Being a principal, being a person
Mm,
who's led things, I didn't feel intimidated by leading anything.
sure.
I knew San Diego because I was from there. I knew where it was. I knew there's a place, beautiful, gorgeous spot on the water, not far from there.
Yes.
I knew it wasn't expensive and it wouldn't require a lot of. I knew so many things about it that I
Yeah.
I had no doubt that I could organize it very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think I knew that what it would feel like to fly in from somewhere else and not know anyone and be in a city
Yeah.
by yourself and have to eat by
Yes.
yourself that day. So I just thought this would feel good if I were here in this place. And those people showed up, are still my friends to this day.
Oh.
Um, and some of them, I mean, I still am admired because they went from 6 to 7 to 8, nine
Yes.
figure entrepreneurs. So I'm
Yes.
just grateful that those are people in my world. But um, it also led to, before he asked me to be his coach, he said, "Would you do this again? We're hosting this again in a few months. Would you host this event? It's going to be bigger. It's going to be 50, but are you okay to do it?" I said, "Absolutely." He goes, "Good. I'll give you a free ticket. Come again." And I was like, "Okay." So it went from, yeah, it was just so crazy. Like, it was just this most ironic moment of just saying yes and trusting that I would figure it
Wow.
out and not worry about it. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Do, is that who you are at your core? Like, I just did this exercise. I was reading Evan Carmichael's book, Built to Serve, and there's an exercise that helps you kind of uncover your purpose in life. And it seems a little silly that at age, I don't know, what am I, 43, that I would be uncovering my purpose in life. But just a couple of months ago, I did this exercise and I found out that the word for me is caring. Like, I just feel this deep sense of needing to care for others and like helping people is like an extension of that for me. And I wonder if this is just who you are in other places in your life where you're just making sure people are feeling cared for, comfortable, or uh, in community.
Yes, that would be true. I tend to serve as an operation, like I really feel called to serve. Maybe
Mm,
that's why I became a teacher. It's a really obvious place to serve.
mm,
Wasn't because didn't love teaching. I love kids. I didn't love teaching.
mm.
Ironically, even though I
Interesting.
got teacher of the year from my district, and I had all these accolades, it wasn't because of teaching. It was I loved helping change the lives of these young people, and um, I think it was just something in me. I don't know what made me confident enough to reach out and ask that question, somebody I didn't know. But I had been listening a lot to some of my other mentors that I had met as well, which is, I just kept implementing this practice
Yeah.
over and over. Chris Gillibo was one of my favorite authors at the time. Um, Seth Godin was one
Yeah.
of my favorite authors at the time.
Yeah.
And I did similar things with those people when I just look for opportunities to serve. And when I am able to meet these people and be in their world, it's just because most people are not thinking about others, or thinking about themselves.
Mm.
And yeah, I'm oriented that way. There was one conference I saw that was coming to San Diego, and I decided, does anybody need a ride from the airport? I just posted who's going to this event. I wasn't going. I didn't have a ticket. They're like, "Oh my god, yes!" And so I drove people to the event back and forth from the airport. They're like, "Wait, are you going to park and come in?" I go, "Oh, I'm not going. I'm not attending." They're like, "What? So you just offered to pick me up and take me?" I was like, "Of course." They're like, "You need to park the car and come in." I was like, okay. So I parked and they introduced me to people, and it was people like that. It was just, I don't know. It just happens that way for me when I don't try to overthink things. That act of service stands out amongst people more than people know, especially at a conference when
Yes.
everyone is the same. Um, and I didn't worry about who they were. Were they important? Were they? I didn't know who they were. And then you find out, oh, this is the person who runs the ads for the person running the event. Oh, wow, that's nice. Good. I didn't know.
It's
I
a good
wasn't
person
doing
to
it for
know.
that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How how have you, because I've actually struggled with that. How do you treat people as human when they are in different positions than you? You know, like they're the mentor that's on stage. How does how have you thought about that?
Well, because oftentimes on a big platform, you won't get a chance to connect with them. They're whisked away behind
Right.
stage.
Yep.
They don't eat dinners with everybody. So don't think of that. So I always say, find out who's the second or third in command,
Mm.
um, and serve them. And then they know as much as that person. They
Yes.
just aren't famous.
Yes.
And they also have unlimited access to the ear of that person.
Yeah.
So I tried it out. So I reached out at the time. 4 Hour Work Week was a big book, and I was really interested in this idea of like
Yeah.
this 4 Hour Work Week that now is not it's sort of passe in some regards. But um, and I found out who helped Tim Ferriss with one of the books, and that was Charlie Hohen. He was a college kid that became his first employee, and I saw him. I reached out to him. I befriended him, and I was like, great. I have everything I need. Everybody he's connected with, Charlie's also connected with. So I just kept
Wow.
implementing this principle. Oftentimes it's the assistant. So I got to know people's assistants very well. I treat them very well
Yes.
and make sure I notice them at a conference and pay attention to them. So when my email goes in the inbox, they remember me
Mm.
because I can't get to the top, but I can serve really well.
Mm.
And I'll serve that person and make their job easier, or help them in some way, or somebody solve a problem. So I just try to think of it that way. I just I don't try to worry about can I get to the top, and then magic happens. That
Yep.
ironically, like that happens. So and so when you are then in presence of all these really successful entrepreneurs, you have to just remember that they're used to pushing people away because they want something from them.
Yes.
But if you can just be yourself and be vulnerable and not be, they could sense like sharks' blood in the water. They sense somebody's neediness and they quickly pull away, or they feel like they're going to be used. They know it's happened to them a lot. So
Yes.
don't do any of that stuff. And also don't, I just interviewed somebody on my podcast who used to be the tour manager for Barry Manilow, for Neil Diamond, the Go-Go's.
Oh, fun.
He was one of my clients. His book's called Rockstar Jason. The reason I mentioned him, he's like, you have to realize that the entry point to them is so different, and don't put them on a pedestal.
Mm.
That's the first thing you need to realize. They're just people. And that's the thing I have to do. And that's how I think about it when I'm at a conference. I rarely pay to go to the conference. I pay to get access to the people that are there
Yeah.
and to try to just observe what's happening,
Yes.
not rush to get the front row of a seat to listen, because I find that the magic's made when I see the person hanging out the door and they have a clipboard. I go, this is somebody I probably should pay attention to.
Mm. Oh, I love your I love your lens of service on the world. Like that's so beautiful, and I think yeah, more of us need to do more of that because yeah, everyone needs a little help. And also, I'm noticing that you really ensure people feel seen and heard and celebrated, and that's just one of my very favorite things. And oh, I love that. I'm wondering what fills you with the most gratitude as you help your clients kind of be able to kind of distill and extract what they know and get it into a book form.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's that I'm not looking for what they have to say. And I know that's ironic
Mm,
because I'm a book coach. You're like, but isn't that the whole point? I say, well, books are not words, and that throws people off. I said, books are messages that words contain. Words are holding the message in place on that page so the reader can read it. But if you could meet the human, if you could observe what's happening in
mm,
their life, you would prefer that. Someone asked me, would you prefer to read a book, about Tina Turner or when she was alive? Would you rather meet her? I was like, 100%. I'd rather meet her
yeah.
because the words on the page mean nothing compared to her. That's true for every human. And so,
Mhm.
first, I tell people, look, the message is more important than the words. The words can be fixed. The message has to be seen and clear.
Mm,
The other thing that really helps me is that most people think that people are reading looking for content. We're not. We don't need your information.
mm,
I know that seems silly and people would argue with me, but I said, think about it. You can Google at this time anything and everything you want. You can YouTube it, you could do whatever you want. You're not at a loss for information. So we're not in need of information. We're in need of a guide who can tell us what to pay attention to about all
mm,
this information.
mm,
So my analogy is, if you imagine it, you got a magnifying glass like I did when I was a kid in a science kit, and you could see things up close, which was amazing. And I've mentioned this before, and you go, wow, this is cool. But the cooler thing is when I went outside, I could move that little lens and I said, ooh, the leaf is burning. Amazing. It caught on fire. That was incredible. Um, or I can burn my friend's leg. And I often say I probably burned a few ants I probably owe karma for. But the lesson I learned was the sunshine just warms your hand if you go out in the sun and put your hand out. But if you take that magnifying glass, that lens, and you move it just the right distance from it, it hyper focuses the light and then ignites. Most people are worried about the content of their books. And I say, that's sunshine. We're all selling sunshine.
mm,
Sunshine is not a commodity you own by yourself, neither is content. But if you can hyper focus the lens of that sunshine, then you have something. But most people miss that they're the lens. So the beauty in my work is when I watch somebody realize, so it's me they're looking, it's me that makes this spark ignite. Yes. Don't worry that anybody else has written a book about this or that there's lots of content out there. Don't try to be original. Sunshine is everywhere. Originality is not what we're looking for. We're looking for, why are you the one that's bending the light that ignites it for this person?
mm,
And when I watch authors find that special thing about who they are
mm,
that makes them worthy and special, that's what lights me up because they have the chance to change the world once they figure that out.
that's so good.
That's what fuels me.
I im imposter syndrome is kind of a big thing in the event space, and I often hear, well, I don't know if it needs to be me or that, there doesn't need another event like this in the world, and my rebuttal to that is always that, like, there's there's a teacher that teaches the way that you, like, learn, and someone who speaks the way that you hear, and what a shame if, like, we, like, rob our community of, like, what you have to say and teach, because there's someone who's just gonna get it because you said it the way you said it. And I've had so many examples of that where I've heard a message several times, several different mentors, and it's just never landed. And then finally, someone else says it just a different, slightly different way. And I'm, oh my gosh, that's what all of them were trying to tell me. And I'm so grateful that they took the chance to put, their spin on that slice of sunshine, right? That everyone else is also putting out there, because it changed my life by
Yeah,
finally getting it. Yeah.
that's right. That's right. Most people think, well, I'm not Hal Elrod. I didn't survive death, or Brendan Burchard. I didn't play professional football. I'm an average human.
Uh-huh.
I worked in HR for 40
Yeah,
years. Why am I special? Right? Or whatever it is.
exactly.
And what I tell people about when they bring that idea to me, who's going to listen to me? In fact, one of the most recent books I helped coach was, he became a New York Times bestseller. He was the one that said it to me. Why are they going to listen to me? I'm like, okay, first of all, you are unique. Let's figure out why. Not we're not looking for experts. I know this seems odd, or a guru. We're looking for people that are relatable, that can make us feel like we can do it.
Mm.
So imposter syndrome is a belief that somebody else can do what I do better, and or that we're not good enough, right? It's all this worthiness stuff. So when it relates to events, I would say the similar thing I would say to authors, which is like, if you think about experts, let's just pick experts. Let's pick academics. That's an easy one. University professors or whatever, Harvard professors. Gosh, they're the experts of the world, teaching business, teaching all these things. I go, but if you go at the end of the semester, the day after the semester ends, the dumpsters will be full of textbooks written by those experts or donated to the library. We're not going to the experts for something to change our life. It's just information. We're going to someone whose compelling reason why they're there connects with my humanity about why
Mm.
I'm there.
Mm.
And we trust that, oh, they see me.
Yep.
They can see my struggles. They know what it's like to be here. So that slight difference is, stop thinking experts are what people are looking for. We're not looking for information because it's everywhere, or experts because they're also, unfortunately, they are everywhere. But experts aren't the ones that change our lives,
Mm.
because people perceive that somebody with knowledge who's doing really well, we think of them as like, you ever see those beautiful tall ships sitting, they're like old revolutionary ships. They're just
Yeah.
gorgeous when they put the sails up. You're like, wow. Even if you've only seen it on a cartoon, you know what I'm talking about. Most people think that the person on the stage or the person reading, writing a book, they must be like the sail. They just capture the wind and they move the boat. And I said, oh, I don't think so. I think you're misunderstanding, because of all the vibrato around people who are influencers or in the public view. A true leader isn't somebody who is the sail. A true leader is actually the rudder, who is unseen but felt. The sails belong to the reader, to the participant in the audience, whose
Mm.
sails are flapping in the wind.
Yep.
And it's the rudder that turns them into the wind and lets their sail be caught. So everyone's got their sails ready. So turn them into the wind. Be the person who gives them the chance to change their perspective just enough. And as you said, that it clicks for them.
Mm.
That's all you have to be. A 1% deviation, a 2% on a rudder, both leaving from the same spot, let's say Portugal, to sail. If they have a 2% deviation, they're going to end up either in South America or the Bahamas. But it's because of the gentle shift that's made by something that's not seen and noticed until later.
Mm.
So, like, stop trying to be the sail. Realize that the person you're serving is the one with the sail, and you're just the one shifting their perspective
Mm.
enough so that the wind will catch them. And I think it takes the pressure off of you having to be like a performer. You're not. You don't have to be a
Yes.
performer. You can be yourself and still change the lives of many people.
Mm. Beautifully said. I
Thank you.
I was thinking about how you coach authors to be their own promoters. And I wonder, how do you coach about the intersection of launching a book and events? Do they play a role in the process? And if so, how, in your perspective?
Yeah. I think most authors often miss this opportunity, that events can be created with a book so easy compared to other things,
Mhm.
because people see a book as a really interesting and easy entry point into the world of the author. We don't get access to authors very often. We think because of social media we do, because if you follow social media and you follow these info, you think, well, everyone's written a book or they're
Yeah.
everywhere. I was like, when was the last time you talked to an author? And like, oh, wait, never? Right. If someone invites you to come here, you speak about your book and the process behind it and what you learned and the things that weren't spoken in the book you'd love to share with them, they're already interested, because knowing an author and being able to hear about it is also exciting. And also the other thing is, selfishly, New York Times published an article in, I think, 2008, said 81% of North Americans at least had a feeling that they had a story inside of them, a book inside of them. They're already secretly thinking, I wonder if I could do this.
Mhm.
So they're already, regardless
Mhm.
of what you're talking about, already have a draw to come. So book events, author events, they're really great places to expose people to what you might offer outside of the book. So I encourage authors to use the book launch. Don't do it like a book signing and just speak. Use it as a way to sell what you're hoping they get from you. You can use it for publicity, of course, photos, stills, reviews. Those are all helpful for marketing, but treat it like an event. You don't have to do it at a bookstore. You could have it as an event, and you could charge them, $100. They get a copy of your book, get it signed, and what you're teaching them is what you would normally teach on a 3-hour webinar.
Yeah.
Teach it in person, and then make an offer from the stage. It's I try to help authors build something from their book when they're writing it. Like, what is your hope for this? What are you dreaming into? Yes, you're
Yeah.
dreaming into being an author. That's already true, but and then what? Is there anything more? And let them start to vision out what's happening so that they don't get, I think, fatigued with just talking about buy my book, buy my book. I'm like, no, it's not about buying your book. It's
Mhm.
about using the book as leverage in every way you can. Same thing, you use an event. Okay, good. The event is not the thing. What are you selling afterwards?
Right.
What are you giving to the audience that's so irresistible that 3% are going to say, gosh, sign me up for that thing?
Mhm. Mhm. When you had just what perfect timing, but when you'd first written your book and you ended up in Pat Flynn's mastermind a month later, the I'm wondering, was that the first time that you learned about kind of being able to monetize on the back of a book, or um, how experts use books to monetize?
Well, ironically, I spent a lot of time learning about publishing and stuff because it was an easy way to avoid writing. So, like a lot of your people listening, you've probably done a lot of research on this, but you've not taken this. That's what happens, right? We get down the rabbit hole of YouTubing and everything.
Yeah.
So I knew a lot about it. I know I needed a lead magnet. I know I needed a website. I knew I needed an email. I knew I needed things, but I just wasn't sure that I wanted to sell from my book
Mm,
because my only purpose was to get a mentor. So I was less interested in that,
yeah.
and I achieved my purpose. But if my purpose is to gain clients or get a following or build an email list, then I should be thinking about it and putting it in the book. So it just struck me that maybe something I already had in my pocket was really useful. I just didn't think it was.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't really think that was a struggle. Even though I had spent 24 years talking about writing a book and then finally writing it, I didn't realize that the biggest hurdle was giving people confidence. That's what they were paying. They're all great writers, bloggers. I've helped professors, like doctors. They're all capable of writing. That's not what they pay me for. They actually ironically pay me for confidence. And so I didn't realize that me just taking that step to say I can help organize this, me being those are, you know, very service oriented, very confident oriented things that I think gave confidence that, like, this person can do that. I trust them.
Mm,
And that's a lot of what I do when I run my own workshops.
yep.
If I do a writer's retreat or writer's weekend, my main job is to get them to be a part of my community or in my programs because I know it will help them. Like, I know that if they really want to do this, write a book, they need to get in a program or it'll just be a pipe dream. Um, so I have all that confidence in the world that if this is right for them, I will make an offer for them to join the next one or to make the irresistible pitch that's coming up. That's what I do when I'm in those spaces. But I think I learned it in the midst of doing it. I don't think I learned it in that moment.
Do you Is that how you primarily use events in your business, as the kind of the top of the funnel, the entry point, as an enrollment event, or do you use events to as fulfillment, as like they're workshopping, they're writing during the thing?
I I've used it for all three. I felt like, why don't I just blend this event, make it
Sure.
a 3-day and make it tiered? So I'll invite my mastermind to come who are authors already.
Okay.
And they'll come for, either as my guest or a fraction of the price, or I'll give them 2 for 1, bring a friend, right? Because
Yes.
if they
So
wrote a book with
smart.
me, they have friends. So I give away tickets to those people because I want them to bring their really highly qualified friends that already love me.
Yes.
Also, I do like an open Eventbrite, like anybody could find it sort of thing for new people. So the first day might be for my clients, like to connect, and it'll be a dinner, and
Yes.
I'll invite prospective people I want to build affiliate relationships with, and
Mm,
just make an extraordinary event. Then the next day might be for new people, a writer's workshop day that everyone can attend if they want, even my former clients. And I'll bring them into the funnel by, wow, these are amazing people. I'll have
yes.
get my mastermind sit on a panel and answer questions. So they get to talk about their book. They'll do a book signing. So they get reward. And then the last day might be something new. I'll invite a guest, my mentor, or I'll invite somebody that they don't know that delights them.
Yes.
So I don't separate them. I just create different phases of it so
Sure.
that they can all mingle, meet, and it serves them in a different way. And so, because if I'm putting the effort to put an event together, I want to pick. I don't want to isolate and say, "Oh no, it's not for you." I was like, "No, it's for all of you, but this is the one that's for you. This part of the
Yes.
day, this is for you." Um, they don't know that my mastermind people are the ones speaking on the stage. They just know, "Oh, these are authors. This is cool." But I'm serving them by giving them B-roll on a stage with some footage, right? I'm giving them books to be sold and signed. I
Yes.
So they're getting their needs met. So are the audience members. So
Mm.
that's how I perceive them, and I don't do them a lot. The other events I host are very much can be both. They're like international retreats. One in Portugal. I'm doing a fiction with purpose retreat in Morocco. I want them to be cool destinations that my ideal clients go, I want to do that. Um, so even if they don't go, they want to talk about it. So I try to focus those things on that way.
Why destination writing retreats? Because
Because I love travel.
so do I. But here's what's conflicting in my head right now. If I'm going to go someplace, I want to experience it. But if I'm going there for a writing retreat, then I guess my job is supposed to be sitting in my room and writing, right? Instead of being
Oh
out
yeah.
and exploring.
So what I do when I take people abroad, so like we did one called the Sandbox Leadership Retreat for authors, and that was for them to lean into their future self. Where are they going now?
Mm.
You're an author. Now what? That's a visionary experience that they go for. They're not sitting in their room. They're processing together. All the writing retreats are process oriented. They're bringing pieces of writing, they're workshopping, they're talking about it, they're working with people in, because writing is often perceived as an isolated thing. And I said,
Yeah.
it's not a solo sport, it's a team sport. So I show them why and how it works. So, but they also need a mix of adventure because it sparks their imagination. So that's why I put them in really cool places. Like the book that inspired me so much as a fiction book was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And
Mhm.
that ends up in Tangier. I was like, well, what if we went to Morocco and we created an experience, and I talk about my book and how that would show them the purpose and let them go through the markets, let them stay in a Casbah,
Mhm.
let them have experiences that spark their imagination and pulls them away from their day to day, and then let them come up with, nurture their ideas and work on some stuff. And then guess what? I'm selling them a 6-month program after you leave.
Yes.
So I'm not focused on the writing there. We're doing some writing to inspire them. Because remember, I'm not selling writing experience, how to write. I'm selling them confidence.
Mm.
So I know that I can give them confidence in a week. I can't teach someone how to write if they're like, "What's this? A pen? I don't know how to write." Like I, I assume most people know how. That's not why they're not writing a book. That's not what's keeping them. It's the fear that it's not going to be good enough. They don't know what to choose.
Yeah.
What will people think?
Mhm.
So those are the things I work on in the workshop that they can process together, and it creates deep, intimate relationships. That's what I do on those retreats.
Got it. And then when you sell them a 6-month thing, then that's where they're getting the accountability and the continued like hits of confidence
Correct.
along the
At the
way.
end of it, they go, "How am I going to finish this without you?" And they're like, "Well, if you'd like."
So funny you
So I
ask.
mean, it's ironic you ask. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. But they can't help but talk about their magical
Mhm.
experience. I want them to talk about it. I want them to dream about it. I want them to post about it. I want
Mm.
them to be eager for the next one. I want to sell out the next event at the one I just had. Like
Mm.
that's how I want to do it. Because they're like, now we're gonna go to the south of France to stay in Julia Child's house where she didn't become an author until she was 48 years old. Come join us if you've been thinking about. Oh my God,
Mm.
food is the focus of that experience. So people are like already dreaming, like, what if?
Mhm.
So that's what I'm giving them is this magical what if, and then helping them play it out, and then bring out
Mm.
the idea. So when they go home, they can't wait to start writing the book.
So good. Do you have a favorite moment at events that you host?
You know what? It's really was hard. It was unintentional. This last event when we took people to Portugal, people flew from all over the
Mm.
world, from Pakistan, from Canada,
Mhm.
from the U.S. And when they all descended to this place, my partner who runs these events with me got sick. He got the flu.
Oh
We
no.
were worried about COVID. He got the flu. We're like the one thing we didn't think about. Um,
Oh.
so a lot of it I had to do on my own, but there was just evenings I set up the dinners. They were like, hey, we got transportation. I will go there with you. I'll make sure you can understand the waiter and everything's good. But then I left because I wanted to make sure my husband wasn't eating by himself, sick alone.
Yeah.
Um, Me letting them be on their own was a magical experience I wouldn't trade for anything
Mm.
because they just bonded in a way without me. I didn't expect that
Yes.
to be so important because it was an accident. When they came back, we just happened to be in the lobby because we were passing back to our room, and they're like, "Oh, hey, hey, hey," and they just kept walking. And we're like, "Oh, we're already having this thing. We're gonna meet up in the bar. We're gonna hang out." I'm like, "Oh, okay, bye." um, so it was like the magic they had created their own magic, and that was an unexpected result. And I would do it again and again because that's when they're really connecting. And when it's an intimate event, when it's a small event, I don't know if it were bigger. Like when I've run over 50, that's happened on its own. I've watched people go, "Hey, we closed down a restaurant last night after talking with you." I was like, "That's amazing." So that magic moment, creating it on purpose instead of unintentionally, it's actually probably the thing I would do again.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it is so special when you're like, "Oh, I made that happen. Like I created that." It's pretty cool. Yeah, but I think
Yeah,
that's a testament to your curation of who's in the room, right? Being so clear on
yeah,
who this is for and who it's not for, so that everyone who shows up, they're meant to be together.
yeah. No, 100%. Thank you for saying that because that's something that's really important. There's two things that I do to do that. One is an application
Mm.
to make sure that the right people, and secondly is the price point.
Mm.
I know this might offend some of you, but I want to price out people who just buy conferences
Mm. Yes.
because they get addicted to going.
Yes.
So I don't make a low ticket offer
That's a
to them
thing.
because I don't
Yeah.
want someone to be an adjacent participant who thinks they're going to sneak in a golf round. I want someone who's all in and
Yes.
they're like, I'm paying this much money. I'm going to pay attention to this thing.
Yes.
So that's the other thing I do is even my own clients who went abroad are like, could you do one in the US? I go, I will, but don't expect it to be here. It's easier, but it's not going to be like less money. Like
Mm.
I just know that this is a curated event by, by me and my husband. So yes, it's easier. It's less time away. I get that. Um, but I still hold that principle. And it's one of the things that Pat taught me is like stay premium because that's who you are. You serve
Yes.
those people like me
Yes.
really well. Not everybody can do this. And if you don't, you're going to be a disservice to people like me. And it was hard because I had to reposition even my whole business because it was just Coach Azul. I coach people and everyone and anyone would come and I could help. And that was great because it was something as a teacher I felt. And I had a big resistance to it, to be honest. But he goes, but you're doing a disservice to people like me if you don't stay up here and serve us because there is nobody doing this
Mm.
for us. There's a lot of people doing it for those people, but what about here? Man, it's hard because it's so easier to chase a lower dollar, but
It
it changes
is.
who's in the room.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it just happens to be audience happens to be these very elite, not because of me. I'm telling you, it's just, I don't do anything different than I would with anybody. It just happens to be a space that I got invited to with someone invited me, hey, will you be my coach? I didn't make the offer. So it sort of started that way. And I just tried to commit to staying that way. And when it gets in scarcity mode and there's not a lot of coming, I get so tempted to go low and just like, oh, I feel the room. I have to remind myself what my purpose is. Because if those creators can make an impact, they're going to really change the world. I want to change millions of people's lives, but I probably won't serve millions. I'll probably serve a few and they're going to serve the millions. So it's just a different perspective that I chose, but doesn't always make it easy to get in those rooms and new people who are at that level you don't know.
You said something interesting there. You said, it's not me. I don't do anything different. But actually, I think that's the secret. Like that's your superpower is your ability to treat people as people. And that's probably why, Pat became a client way back when, right? Because you
Mm.
just treated him as human. And at that echelon, they're like we talked about earlier, kind of repelled by the people who are acting like sharks, and that you just have
Yeah.
this natural ability to be zen. That's how I feel around you, and
Yeah.
relate to people, and then that's attractive. Like that, like what do they call that? They're
Yeah.
like your attractive character. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I can say no and push back on them in a
Mm,
very
mm-hmm,
gentle way, but very
mm-hmm.
firm because I have. I always feel like I could teach anyone.
Mhm.
Like, I don't feel I'm not intimidated by anyone's position
Yeah.
at all. I don't know where that comes. I honestly don't. But what I do notice is that when you treat them with confidence
Mm.
and you push back and don't just say yes to everything, that they actually value you more because no one's saying, actually, I don't agree with you. Let me tell you why. They're like, they might still disagree, but they appreciate it. But oftentimes they're like, oh, man, thank you so much. So it's that ability to see someone who isn't famous in the eyes of the world or influential the same way you see somebody in a small village somewhere. I think
Yeah.
that's the potency. I would, in fact, when I used to just take anyone's call, which was fun for a while, then it got a little bit exhausting, was this person who, it was a small village in Africa in a small part. I think it was in Ghana, and they had heard my podcast or something. They booked a time with me. I'm like, I was taking everyone, so I said yes, and it was 15 minutes of my life. So, and I called them. They said, "Could you call me?" I said, "Oh yeah," and I was like, "First, I got to get a phone number I can call." But yes, I called them, and they were like, it was really scratchy. It was small, but I talked to them, and they're like, I'm sorry if it's scratchy. I'm borrowing the cell phone. I had to ride my bike to the next village to borrow the only cell phone, and I'm here on behalf of my village, and I want to ask you questions about writing a book. I'm like, okay. And they were asking me all these questions. I said, actually, don't do that because of this reason. You need to focus on this. They're like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. And I never heard from them again, but I treated them the same way. Even I was blown away that they would go to this effort to have somebody like me talk to them.
Yes.
But I was very confident in treating them. Not, I didn't take it lightly. That I thought, wow, that this is a big sacrifice they're making just to have a 15-minute call. I really want to give them value,
Yes.
and that struck with me. That
Mhm.
with me, and I just remember that what if you didn't know who that was on the other end? Would you treat them differently because they had money or they didn't
Mm.
have something or they didn't have influence? I think too many people get caught up in it, and people, like I said, people at the top sniff that out really hugely. And I get referrals from actors, like famous people or football players, and I don't go unless I like if I know who they are because I've seen them on TV. I just say okay. I just try not to learn too much about them. I just don't want to perceive them any other way besides
Yes.
what we have in the call.
Yes.
And that helps me because I don't build a false identity of what people are saying or how they position themselves online,
Yes.
because it could be very different than who they really are. So I try to stay open minded about them and listen to them intently, um, and help navigate themselves through a very difficult thing they're doing, which is how do I put myself onto the page?
Yes. Yeah. That it is. It's a very vulnerable and like trying. I don't want to say excruciating process, but pulling out what
Yeah, that's probably accurate.
pulling what you have out of your head and getting it onto paper is no easy feat. And that's awesome that you give people the gift of confidence, as you say, to um, help them make their dreams come true in that way. It's so special and it's
Yeah.
such a long lasting, like a legacy type gift you're giving them too, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I, the books I'm currently writing, I teach a program called Fiction with Purpose. A lot of entrepreneurs, because most people have a dream, like writing a fiction book would be cool, but I don't really have a reason to.
Mm.
I'm not trying to be a fiction author, but if you write it for purpose, it can have a really bigger meaning for people. And legacy is an important thing when you're successful already. You're thinking, so now what?
Yeah.
So I help people find the perhaps the fiction story within them that might leave a legacy for them. And I find that helping them nurture out what matters to them is really important to them. It's not something they do in their day to day. They're basically running their
Yeah.
business. So I think it's about being seen and heard and understood in a way that they probably haven't felt in a long time. And so that's, again, it's a gift to be able to be in that space with them and give them confidence. Running events is, gosh, I think that's harder than writing books, but I really think that some of the same principles apply, that what they're doubting about themselves is the same wherever they put the doubt, right?
Mm.
Wherever they put their
Yep.
attention, the doubt will arise. So it translates, it helps them in other parts of their life. Once they kind of own this idea of authorship, they start to realize how important they are to the world.
Now, it made me think about how I just finished. I'm calling it the trilogy of the Who Not How, The Gap and the Gain, and 10x is Easier Than 2x, but all by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And I get the sense that Dan is dedicating I think he's in, I don't know, end of his 70s, maybe starting 80s, but like the next 20 years, I think, as he calls it, to books, like just getting, and to me, that feels very much like legacy, to get it all out
Yeah.
and onto paper.
Yeah. It really is. It's a lot of people tell me, entrepreneurs in particular, I want my kids to read this to know who I am.
Mm, mm,
Mm. I'm like, yes. The books I've written, my kids don't read. They might someday, even though my kids are in their 20s. It's just, but it's a way of capturing who you are and what you think and believe and
yeah.
what you stood for, your journey, whatever it is you're trying to capture. It's something meaningful. And the reason is because two things. One, books have been around for centuries, for millennia. So we know what a book is intrinsically. We don't need to be told. You could give a book to a 3-year-old, go, what is this? They're like, book. Yes. You tell someone the podcast, they're like, now they know, but most of them are like, when I started 6 years ago, like, podcast, what? Social media will come and go, but books are long lasting. So they have a longer sense of permanence
Yep.
than
Mm,
something that's ephemeral. It's a physical thing. And the other thing is that we are hardwired as humans to tell stories. And before the advent of writing and after, remember, only priests, only very educated people had access to writing and tools. The rest of us passed on our knowledge until about 200 years ago through storytelling.
mm.
We passed on how to find the right berries through our tales, what's good and bad. So it's hardwired in us what story means. And it's internal. It's part of our DNA. So there's something, the legacy building about that, that's important to us as humans. So we feel so drawn to do it because it's part of who we are.
Do you have another legacy type book, message that you know that you need to get out of you and onto paper for your kids?
Well, ironically, it's during the pandemic when we all couldn't travel and see our family like
Mm,
we used to. My father-in-law, we taught them how to do Zoom. We had to use FaceTime to teach how to do Zoom. It's kind of funny, but eventually we got them to understand how Zoom works because we wanted to record our father-in-law, who was in his 80s at the time, tell us stories. He always be like, "Hey, let me tell you one," and he would tell us a story, it'd be 2 or 3 minutes. And eventually we just said, "Can we just record these?
yeah.
Because we'd love to write a book about these." And he's like, "Okay." Um, I wanted to record these stories, but what it turned into is we turned into these recordings because he's since passed away. We wrote a series of 3 novels based on his growing up in this small coal mining town and what it was like to grow up there because that town is sort of gone. It's sort of
Mhm,
withered
mhm.
away and he's now passed. So for our own children to capture the stories that he told us over the years that we never really, they went in one ear out the other. We knew of them, but no one had really copped them and wrote them down so that our kids would know their grandfather's stories. And so in that sense, these fiction series called Cinder Bottom, which will come out here in just over a month, is about that legacy and it's told in the form of fiction. So that's my legacy project that I'm working
Oh, that's beautiful.
on. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. It's actually making me sad that I didn't do that with my grandmother. She just passed, and there's so many stories that she would tell on repeat. Uh, and
Yeah.
yeah, oh, that would have been great. Azul, I always like to end by asking a question about reading. I value lifelong learning so much, and I also subscribe to the school of thought that we have to design our curriculum with intention. And so, before we wrap up here, I'd love to know 3 parts. First, what book are you reading right now? Why did you pick that book? And what's one thing you learned so far?
Gosh. Well, I'm fortunate enough that I read probably 3 books a week because I interview a show with authors. So what I'm reading now is sort of a loaded question. I'm reading a lot now, but the book I'm in the midst of is called the Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, and the reason I'm reading it is about healing through trauma. And it's a book my daughter was reading, and I thought if she's reading it, there's got to be something to it. And just this idea of like transmuting your trauma into some useful
Mm,
part of you um, was really important to me, because I find out as my work with authors, some people struggle with writing, and most of their struggle is unresolved trauma, and that's why they struggle with writing. And trauma with a small t, or trauma with a big T, however you think of
yep.
it, that there's some block there. So I have to often work through people's trauma even if they're not aware of it. So it's helpful for me to read a book like that to help me get in the mind of a doctor who's thinking about this in a more profound
Yes.
way. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by, like, can you cut to the chase? Because I read a lot of entrepreneur books are like really actionable, like The Gap in the Game, very useful, very actionable. Yes, they're stories, but these bigger books, that's one that I'm reading
Mm.
currently that I'm taking away from and putting into
Oh,
practice.
how interesting. I love that. Well, Azul, what have you got going on right now that we should know about, and where can Lynchpin Nation find you?
Oh, that's awesome. Well, they can always go to authorswholead.com. That's where I live out
Okay.
of. My podcast is the same name, Authors Who Lead. And if they're thinking about writing, or if they have a book, like, so if they go there, there's a calendar they can get for, it's 365 um, days of marketing ideas for their book, and viral hooks for sharing videos about action to take when they talk about their book. And it's planned out all of 2024, so you don't have to worry about what day it is. You pick it up, you open and go, oh, I could do that today. So that's a free. I built it for my clients, and I thought, well, what's a really valuable, easy gift that I would want? And it'd be this, because people have been asking for it for years, and I finally did it. So that's something they can go get there for free if they're
Oh,
interested.
that's awesome. That sounds really useful. Very service-oriented gift. I love it. Well, I will link all
Great.
that up in the show notes. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me, Sarah. It's been a blast.
Thank you for listening to the Green Room Central podcast. If you loved this episode, then please take a screenshot on your phone and post it to Instagram, and be sure to tag @SarahPfeiffer and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear, or who you'd like to hear from in the future. That'll help me know what to create for you. Also, if scaling events in your business sounds like something you want to tackle this year and you need a coach, let's connect to see if one-on-one coaching is for you. Just go to greenroomcentral.com. You and I can work together one-on-one throughout the course of the year and dive deep into the inner workings of your events and business. You'll receive mentorship, personalized feedback, and customized guidance to define your goals and achieve your next level of success. Just go to greenroomcentral.com right now to apply. I appreciate your commitment to leveling up and learning the mindset and strategy of live events. Keep going. Keep learning. If you want more, head over to greenroomcentral.com for show notes and all the links from today's episode.